Now we're back to SpongeBob SquarePants on Nickelodeon.
Are you ready, kids?
Hello, it's Employee a Million, and welcome back to a brand spanking new third season of SpongeComs. Today we've got Season 3, Episode 1, or Episode 41 overall, The Algae's Always Greener, and SpongeGuard on Duty, both of which originally premiered on Nickelodeon on March 22nd, 2002, ahead of the premiere of the brand new Nicktoon Chalk Zone. So, yeah, we're moving forward in Nicktoon history. Angry Beavers, Cat Dog, that generation is fading out. We've got Chalk Zone, Jimmy Neutron coming up. Fairly Odd Parents is hitting its stride, so yeah. Television history is changing ever so slightly, and SpongeBob is along for the ride. It is not going away anytime soon. And here we've got the third season premiere, or the first sort of package of Season 3 that, I don't know. I really don't know how Nickelodeon does it, because it technically had some premieres earlier, dating back to October 2001, but The Algae's Always Greener is considered the first episode of Season 3, and whether or not it makes any sense, it is a very good introduction to the season. It was written by Aaron Springer, C.H. Greenblatt, and Meriwether Williams. Power Trio made some of my favorite episodes, and I know that it's not just their contributions to the program, it's about all the other writers and animators and voices. And yeah, this is a really great way to start a really great season of SpongeBob. This is still one of the very best seasons of the show. And yeah, just wanted to talk about what exactly made it such a good premiere. Premiere-ish, pseudo-premiere. It's apparently a favorite of Paul Tibbitt's. Encyclopedia SpongeBobia lists a website where Paul Tibbitt apparently gave an interview. However, the link is dead, so I don't know, maybe use Internet Archive next time. However, I could totally understand if it is a favorite of his, because, I mean, a lot of the stuff in here does sort of showcase the hallmarks of the better aspects of his time running the show. This is also apparently the first time that Karen is ever called by her name. Other times, Plankton just referred to her as his computer wife. This is the first time he gives her a name. I also always liked the idea of holographic meatloaf. I don't know why. It's just a nice looking meatloaf right there. I think something that really carried over into the Tibbett era is that Plankton is so much more casual here. Like, he isn't as much of a megalomaniac. He isn't as much into gadgetry and deceivery. Don't know if that's a word, but you know what I mean. He's just kind of a dude who doesn't have a high place in the world, no pun intended. And right here you get a very brief animation era. You can see a blue screen during the bubble transition, which is dated May 29th, 2001. Thank goodness we know the exact date that specific bit of animation was completed, because otherwise we would be totally lost. I really love the idea of this episode taking place in a different universe, sort of. It's not like Plankton went back in time and changed this timeline. This is just some sort of either a simulation, or he literally sent himself to a parallel universe. I could make a really tired Mario 64 joke right there, but it's 2002. It's the year of sunshine, so wouldn't really work. Either way, because of the fact that most of this episode is set in a parallel universe or some sort of simulation, this is technically the only episode of SpongeBob where SpongeBob doesn't appear. Of course, this sort of alternate counterpart appears, but really, you could make the argument that he's still here. This isn't a totally different character. the only real major change to his characterization is that he looks up to Plankton now rather than Mr. Krabs. But yeah, this is still a very good episode for him. He's still very full of beans, very resourceful when he needs to be, judging by his canon escapades later in the episode. It is a much more hyperactive interpretation of the character because he is just all up in Plankton's face sometimes, and I think that's not really the fault of them starting to make SpongeBob a bit too much. I think this is supposed to show that to someone as inexperienced and as small as Plankton, having an employee like SpongeBob loom over you is a bit much. Like, this whole episode is just an exploration of how Plankton probably shouldn't really strive to be exactly like Mr. Krabs. He shouldn't really want a daughter. He should just want world domination and holographic meatloaf. I think what I love most about this episode, aside from the fact that Plankton is really invested in those two buns, what are they trying to pull there? This episode is just classic bit after classic bit. Because right here, you get the whole bit, which, even if it is a little questionable exactly how stereotypical it's meant to look, I lost it every time I got to this bit as a kid, and I still really appreciate how sudden and out of nowhere it is. And then right after this, you get Squidward telling him, remember that talk we had about personal space, which is much more relevant now than when the episode was made. And then after this, you get the bit where SpongeBob has two mouths. And then after this, you get the bit with the ugly Krabby Patty, the OG Nasty Patty, if you will. And then after that, you get Good Grief, He's Naked. And then after that, you get the victory screech, which is done a lot more later. I think this is something that... Oh no, they did it in Jellyfish Hunter. So, season 2 wins yet again, season 3. But they do it in Club SpongeBob, they do it in Patrick Smartpants. I can imagine them doing it in some of the movies, but it is sort of a pseudo-trademark of SpongeBob. Not exactly as big as Patty Flippin' and Jellyfishin', but it is something that you kind of think of when you think of SpongeBob's childlike sense of fun. Ooh, here we get Pearl, and again, it's kind of showing that she is a bit much, but you could kind of argue she is a bit much here. But I don't know, I like these jokes. They're not the worst. I'm just kind of glad that Laurie Allen isn't getting too nasally at this point. There's still a bit of a deepness to the voice. But I think also that's a pretty underrated visual gag there. Patrick bloating up from sucking in one of her tears. That's a really good visual gag that goes a bit underappreciated in the grand scheme of just how chaotic this episode is. And this episode just has really good escalation because it just crescendos. It just gets harder and harder on Plankton. And it gets harder and harder on me because SpongeBob says that he has soiled the good Krusty Krab name, but this is the Krusty Plankton in this universe. Come on now. But that is really the only real continuity error. Maybe this is the SpongeBob from our dimension. Maybe that's why he called it the Krusty Krab. Checkmate, Encyclopedia SpongeBobia. So, anyway, now we've got some real action going on. We've got, because Plankton is successful in this universe somehow, Mr. Krabs is the one who is the thief and the trickster. I like how this could also be caused by an alternate outcome in an upcoming season premiere, but more on that when we get there. Butterfly effect, you know? But anyway, I do really like this idea that Krabs is the villain in this timeline, because he always has been antagonistic towards Plankton, but this is taking it to actual villainy, and it is really cool to see. They do have to make haha nudity jokes, but I don't know. They do some cool stuff with it, with the cannon and the bra. It's not. It's like, again, good escalation of what they're trying to do. So overall, I do think that this episode is a bona fide classic. It is an excellent way to start the season, and yeah, maybe one of the very best, if not the very best, season premiere in the history of the show. But even then, you don't really think of it as like the start of the season, because you think of Help Wanted as that, Fear of a Krabby Patty as that, Your Shoes Untied as that. Not exactly The Algae's Always Greener. You think of it as a really good episode in its own right with some dang good gags. I'm wondering if, well, obviously by this point, but I'm wondering if how many times Mr. Krabs says the next day. Wonder if Plankton has had that many attempts since, if that makes any sense. But I don't know. It ends on a wonderful joke about Plankton needing to remember them all in therapy, and then a joke after that where he's really dang enjoying his holographic meatloaf, and you know what? Good on him. The grass is always greener, or the algae in this case, you know what I mean, you know. So basically, all I got from this episode is that Plankton really likes when two buns are together. So yeah, near perfect episode, 9 out of 10. SpongeGuard on Duty was written by Jay Linder, Sam Henderson, and Mark O'Hare. This was one of Sam Henderson's first contributions to the show. I think he only did season 3 episodes, and we're going to get some more season 3 exclusives coming up that give the episode just a slightly different flavor from season 2. Like, 2 and 3 are nearly indistinguishable, but as 3 goes on, it gets more of its identity together. And whether or not you think it's better than 2 or worse, it's still a really good season of the show. And this is also one of the first times that Caleb Mura was a storyboard artist, and he would work on seasons 2 and 3, but way more on 3 as a head storyboard artist. Now, the funny thing about this episode is that this episode was somehow popular enough to get a DVD release, like a DVD dedicated to itself, like with this episode being front and center on the cover, on the DVD menus, and I don't really know why. Maybe they were strapped for episodes by that point. It was June of 2004 when that specific DVD released, and they were running out of pre-movie episodes to, hype up and advertise. Sponge for Hire, which came out right after, I think did a better job of that. It hinted at Krusty Krab training video, but it could be any episode on the disc. Always loved this little cutaway to a live-action SpongeBob mascot suit being a lifeguard. I just thought it was always very surreal seeing that sort of thing in the show. So anyway, what do I like about SpongeGuard on Duty? Well, there are a few things. I do really like the concept of just SpongeBob and Patrick at the beach. Like, we get it a bit later on with episodes like Sandcastles in the Sand, but this is an episode where it starts with them just chilling at the beach. Sometimes it's SpongeBob and Sandy, sometimes it's SpongeBob by himself. And again, beach is a very sort of oceanic kind of environment, so makes perfect sense why it would be a common location in this show, even though it was hardly seen in season 2 and isn't seen as much in 3 either. But yeah, I think they are starting to do more with it these days. I mean, the bloody camp they go to in the spin-off is sort of a beach when you think about it, but we don't talk about that here. It's still 2002. Let's bask in the moment. Not the worst show ever, but you know what I mean. Anyway, another way this episode is kind of important is that it's one of the first real spotlights for Larry as a character. You get to know who he is, how he bounces off SpongeBob, how dumb he is for thinking that vanilla ice cream is sunscreen that you put on your nose. But yeah, there is some enjoyment to be had in how Larry is in this episode. He's not eating worm puppies yet. He's just a big, strong dude who's got his life kind of together. He's really respected figure at the beach. He already was in episodes like Ripped Pants, but here he's got a much more friendly relationship with SpongeBob, and I think that totally works out. Gives us something to do for a nice little montage here, and it's also the catalyst for a conflict that SpongeBob's enjoying the higher life of being a lifeguard, but can't exactly swim. And this is a little criticism, or at least a sharp observation that I should make about how this episode depicts lifeguards. You probably shouldn't, rush straight into the water to save a drowning person if someone really is that far out and drowning, because there is a good chance that you might start drowning too. Love that early CGI. Even if you're the most experienced swimmer in the world, this is probably not a very good idea. I'm sure this was done in a lot of old-timey 50s and 60s surfing movies and shows about lifeguards saving lives. Maybe in Baywatch. I've hardly ever seen any Baywatch. I know that's sacrilege for someone who's seen the movie so many times. But I do really like this joke. I probably shouldn't read and swim. That's a good way to prepare people to not drink and drive, or, I don't know, karate chop the TV and drive. This is where the episode kind of dips for me, because, I mean, I totally get where SpongeBob is coming from, but I do kind of get sort of premonitions of Party Pooper Pants and such from his portrayal here, where he's very, not exactly super optimistic, not super, kind, but whatever. They needed a conflict. They got it. There's some good jokes in here. It's not total character derailment yet. Gonna get glimpses of it in a few points in season 3, but nothing show-breaking. Just kind of annoying from time to time. I do like that they use this shark from Muscle Bob Buff Pants. Again, this is his second appearance in a beach-themed episode, and it's in a completely different context. Also really like this sea monster bit. You can also kind of see that the old tertiary character Scooter's intelligence has gone down a bit. In season 1, he was SpongeBob's good friend. In season 2, he's totally okay with dying. In season 3, he's letting this buff guy throw him into a rock several times. This is the sort of character derailment that we should be complaining about. I don't know if they've ever really brought him back. I mean, of all the characters that they could, do something with, I've always found Scooter to be a rather underappreciated one. Also really like this little bit. I mean, as mixed as I am on this second half, I do really like that SpongeBob gets them by making them get out and eat food so they have to wait. But then the episode bothers me again with Patrick coming in just to make things harder for SpongeBob. They needed something. They needed someone to do it, I guess. I see Patrick can't read. I'm sure there are episodes that contradicted, episodes that play into that, but whatever, it's a joke. It's a show. But yeah, I still do have to appreciate how action-packed this ending is. What they do here, they sort of give SpongeBob different assortments of gags to do to try and help his friend out of the ocean, well, the lagoon. And yeah, they are pretty fun jokes in their own right. There's the one I liked the most was him soaking up all the water only to swallow Patrick with it. I mean, I always wondered if he could just squeeze Patrick out or just not drink him through the straw in the first place, but, you know, cartoon logic. SpongeBob's a cartoon. That's not the sort of thing I should be complaining about. So yeah, this episode may not be one of my very favorites, but I still do think that it has some merit. It does have some sort of value to its audience to let them know that the beach is cool, but it can also be a really dangerous place. And it portrays that through humor, which, I mean, good comedy should, right? And there's also this little bit at the end where Larry's trying to get SpongeBob and Patrick to learn how to swim. Very ironic because they're all undersea creatures. But yeah, I totally get the irony there. Even if sponges and starfish aren't exactly known for their swimming. I always thought of that when I was, like, learning to swim in my own youth. But otherwise, this episode is decent for what it is. I can kind of understand why it headlined a DVD. After all, it was aired in the summer, and yeah, that is a good time to advertise the beach, and that is a good looking cover, I'm not gonna lie. I did really miss when SpongeBob covers had that sort of look and feel and theme to it. Not that they can't do decent stuff today, but yeah, it was definitely a different time. So basically, that is Season 3, Episode 1, The Algae's Always Greener, and SpongeGuard on Duty. My question of the week for you a couple months ago was, what was your favourite moment from Season 2? A lot of answers. Jack McGinn's favourite is SpongeBob and Patrick telling on Mr. Krabs to his mother in Sailor Mouth. Makes me laugh every single time. Super Seals is the seagull bit in Pressure. The moment to me is one of the funniest things ever in SpongeBob. Carmen TV is the story of the ugly barnacle in Something Smells. RAL Systems is Sweet Victory. Yeah. Always a fan favourite. Carmen Reviews is The Grill Is Not a Home from Welcome to the Chum Bucket. Lum Invaders is this the Krusty Krab? No, this is Patrick. Who's that? Rebel Friends is also Sweet Victory. And Buddha Gingers is What Are You Looking At? The Nose is from Squidville. That is a very underrated visual gag. I like that too. My question of the week for you this week is, how would you feel about a whole episode without SpongeBob? Or any sort of variation of SpongeBob? What if SpongeBob was gone? That sort of thing. Join me in 2 weeks when I look into other sorts of desires. The desires for food in Club SpongeBob, and the desires for a equine friend in My Pretty Seahorse. Goodbye for now.